In this slide, we will examine the dramatic structure of Pygmalion. George Bernard Shaw carefully organizes the play according to the traditional structure of drama, but he also gives it a modern and unconventional ending. Let us begin with the exposition, which occurs in Act 1. The exposition introduces the major characters, setting, and central conflict of the play. We meet Eliza Doolittle, a poor flower girl struggling to survive in London. We are also introduced to Professor Henry Higgins, the brilliant phonetics expert, and Colonel Pickering, the courteous language scholar. Most importantly, Higgins makes his famous claim that he can transform Eliza into a duchess simply by teaching her proper speech. This establishes the main premise of the play and prepares the audience for the experiment that follows. Next comes the rising action, which takes place in Acts 2 and 3. During this stage, the conflict develops and the tension gradually increases. Eliza arrives at Higgins' house seeking lessons. The transformation process begins. She undergoes speech training, learns new manners, and enters a world completely different from her previous life. In Act 3, she faces her first social tests at Mrs. Higgins' drawing room and later in high society. These events increase suspense because the audience wonders whether the experiment will ultimately succeed. The climax occurs with Eliza's success at the embassy reception. This is the highest point of dramatic tension. Eliza successfully passes as an aristocratic lady. Even experts cannot detect her humble origins. From Higgins' perspective, the experiment is a complete triumph. The goal established in Act 1 has been achieved. However, Shaw immediately introduces a deeper conflict. The external success of the experiment leads to an internal crisis for Eliza. The falling action occurs in Act 4. After the embassy success, the focus shifts from social achievement to emotional consequences. Eliza realizes that Higgins values the experiment more than her feelings. She rebels against his treatment and begins questioning her future. The famous slipper scene, the argument with Higgins, and her decision to leave mark the emotional turning point of the play. The tension now moves from external transformation to personal identity and independence. Finally, we reach the denouement, or resolution, in Act 5. Here the major conflicts are discussed and examined. Eliza returns as a confident and independent woman. Doolittle's unexpected rise in social class provides comic resolution. Higgins gradually recognizes Eliza's strength and maturity. However, Shaw does not provide a definite conclusion. Instead, he gives the play an open ending. The audience is left to decide Eliza's future. This unresolved ending is one of the most modern aspects of Pygmalion. Therefore, the structure of the play can be remembered very easily. Act 1, Exposition, Introduction of characters and experiment. Acts 2 and 3, Rising action, Eliza's training and social testing. Embassy reception, Climax, the experiment succeeds. Act 4, Falling action, Eliza's rebellion and emotional crisis. Act 5, Denouement, Independence, Self-discovery, and an open ending. This structure demonstrates Shaw's skill as a dramatist, combining traditional dramatic organization with modern psychological depth and social criticism. In this slide, we examine the major themes of Pygmalion. Understanding these themes is extremely important because competitive examinations often ask questions not only about the story but also about the ideas Shaw wanted to communicate through the play. The first major theme is language and class. For Shaw, language is much more than a way of communication. In the society shown in Pygmalion, a person's accent immediately reveals his or her social background. People are judged not by their character, intelligence, or morality, but by the way they speak. This is why Higgins becomes interested in Eliza. He believes that by changing her pronunciation, he can change the way society sees her. For example, in Act 1, Eliza is treated as a poor flower girl because of her Cockney accent. After training, the same people who would ignore her begin treating her like a lady. Shaw therefore exposes how unfair social judgments can be. The second major theme is transformation. Transformation operates on two levels in the play. The first is external transformation. Eliza receives new clothes, learns proper pronunciation, and acquires upper-class manners. These changes make her appear like a refined lady. However, Shaw suggests that external transformation alone is not enough. The more important transformation is internal. Eliza develops confidence, dignity, self-respect, and independence. By the end of the play, she is no longer the frightened flower girl of Act 1. She becomes a strong individual capable of making her own decisions. The third major theme is feminism. Eliza's journey is not simply about becoming a lady. It is about becoming an independent woman. At first, Higgins treats her like an experiment. He believes he has the right to control her future. But Eliza refuses to remain dependent on him. A famous example occurs when she says, "I sold flowers. I didn't sell myself." Through this statement, she asserts her dignity and rejects the idea that a woman should depend entirely on a man. This makes Eliza one of the earliest examples of a modern independent female character in English drama. The fourth major theme is identity crisis. As Eliza changes, she faces a serious problem. She can no longer return comfortably to her old life because she has changed too much. At the same time, she is not completely accepted by the upper class because she was not born into it. As a result, she belongs fully to neither world. This creates an identity crisis. She repeatedly asks what her future will be and where she truly belongs. Shaw uses this conflict to show that social transformation is often more complicated than it appears. The fifth major theme is appearance versus reality. Throughout the play, people judge others based on appearance. Fine clothes, elegant speech, and polished manners create the impression of superiority. Yet Shaw repeatedly demonstrates that appearances can be deceptive. For instance, Eliza looks like an aristocratic lady, but her background remains unchanged. Similarly, many upper-class characters appear respectable but often display superficial attitudes. Shaw therefore argues that character is more important than outward appearance. The sixth major theme is education. Education serves as a powerful force for change in the play. Through phonetic training, Eliza gains confidence, knowledge, and access to new opportunities. Education enables her to rise socially and intellectually. However, Shaw also shows that education creates new challenges. After transformation, Eliza struggles to find her place in society. Thus, education opens doors, but it also raises difficult questions about identity and belonging. The seventh major theme is social mobility. The play reflects a society that is changing rapidly. Traditional class barriers are beginning to weaken, and people can move upward through education, skill, and personal effort. Eliza's transformation represents this possibility of social mobility. Yet Shaw does not present it as entirely positive. Social advancement can bring uncertainty, confusion, and loss of identity. Therefore, the play presents both the opportunities and the difficulties of moving from one social class to another. To conclude, these themes are deeply interconnected. Language leads to transformation. Transformation creates identity crisis. Identity crisis encourages independence. Through all these themes, Shaw criticizes class prejudice and argues that human worth should be measured by character, dignity, and respect rather than accent, appearance, or social status. For examination purposes, remember this simple formula: language to transformation to identity crisis to independence. This chain of ideas forms the thematic backbone of Pygmalion and helps explain Shaw's social message throughout the play. This slide explores two of the most important critical approaches to Pygmalion, the study of language and the feminist interpretation of the play. These ideas are particularly important because they help us understand why Pygmalion remains relevant even today. Let us begin with language and phonetics. The central idea of the play is that language functions as social power. In the society Shaw portrays, speech is not merely a tool of communication. It is a marker of class, status, education, and opportunity. People judge one another almost instantly based on accent and pronunciation. This is why Higgins believes phonetics is so important. He understands that language can determine how society treats an individual. The best example is Eliza Doolittle. At the beginning of the play, Eliza speaks in a strong Cockney dialect, which was associated with the working-class population of London. Her accent immediately identifies her social position. People assume she is uneducated, poor, and socially inferior before they know anything about her character. As a result, Eliza's speech becomes a symbol of working-class identity. Shaw uses this situation to criticize a society that judges people according to accent rather than ability or personality. From a modern perspective, Pygmalion can also be studied as a work of sociolinguistics, the study of the relationship between language and society. The play examines four closely connected ideas: language, class, power, and identity. Language reveals class. Class influences power. Power shapes opportunities. And all of these factors contribute to personal identity. This makes Pygmalion much more than a simple comedy. It becomes a sophisticated study of how society functions. Higgins firmly believes that correct pronunciation can erase class barriers. His experiment with Eliza is based on this belief. When Eliza learns refined speech, society begins treating her differently. She gains access to places and opportunities that were previously closed to her. In this sense, Higgins is correct. Language can influence social mobility. However, Shaw also shows the limitations of Higgins' theory. Although language changes how society sees Eliza, it does not automatically solve her emotional and personal struggles. Identity is more complex than pronunciation alone. This brings us to the second major topic: the feminist interpretation of the play. Many modern critics view Eliza as an example of the new woman emerging in the early 20th century. The term, new woman, refers to women who sought independence, education, economic freedom, and personal autonomy rather than traditional dependence on men. At the beginning of the play, Eliza is poor and vulnerable. Her opportunities are limited. However, as the story progresses, she develops into a confident and self-respecting individual. By the end of the play, she becomes independent, self-respecting, emotionally strong. Most importantly, she learns to make decisions for herself. This transformation is what makes Eliza such a powerful female character. The feminist interpretation also examines Higgins as a patriarchal authority figure. Throughout much of the play, Higgins attempts to control Eliza's life. He decides how she should speak. He determines how she should behave. He plans her future without consulting her. In many ways, he represents a traditional male authority figure who assumes he knows what is best for a woman. However, Eliza gradually challenges this authority. She refuses to remain an object or possession. She rejects dependence and insists on being treated as an equal human being. This conflict reaches its peak in Act 4 and Act 5 when she openly confronts Higgins and asserts her independence. The feminist message of the play is therefore clear: women deserve dignity, respect, freedom, and autonomy. Eliza's greatest achievement is not speaking like a duchess. Her greatest achievement is becoming a woman who controls her own destiny. Therefore, from both a sociolinguistic and feminist perspective, Pygmalion is a revolutionary work. It demonstrates how language influences social status while also showing that true human development requires confidence, dignity, and independence. Through Eliza's journey, Shaw challenges class prejudice, questions traditional gender roles, and argues that every individual deserves respect regardless of social background or gender. For examination purposes, remember this key formula: language is social power. Respect is personal growth. Independence is Eliza's true transformation. These three ideas summarize the deeper meaning of Pygmalion and its lasting significance in modern literary criticism. Let us begin with the Marxist interpretation. Marxist criticism focuses on issues such as class conflict, economic inequality, power structures, and social oppression. From a Marxist perspective, Pygmalion is not simply the story of a flower girl learning proper English. It is a story about class divisions and the ways society maintains those divisions. The society presented in the play is highly stratified. People are categorized according to social class, wealth, education, and occupation. The upper classes possess power and privilege, while the working classes struggle for opportunity and recognition. One of the most important Marxist ideas in the play is that speech functions as social capital. Normally, Capital refers to wealth, money, or economic resources. In Pygmalion, language becomes a form of social wealth. People with refined speech gain access to opportunities, respect, and social influence. People with working-class accents are often excluded from these advantages. Eliza's transformation demonstrates this process perfectly. Nothing essential about her intelligence or character changes. Yet society begins treating her differently simply because her speech changes. This reveals how social systems often value appearances and cultural markers rather than genuine human worth. From a Marxist viewpoint, language becomes a tool that helps maintain class distinctions. The play also presents Alfred Doolittle as a critic of capitalist morality. Doolittle repeatedly mocks middle-class values. He rejects conventional ideas about respectability, responsibility, and success. When he unexpectedly becomes wealthy, he discovers that wealth brings social obligations and restrictions. Instead of celebrating his new position, he complains about it. Through Doolittle, Shaw satirizes capitalist society and questions the assumption that economic advancement automatically leads to happiness. Doolittle exposes the contradictions and hypocrisies hidden within social and economic systems. Now let us turn to the psychological interpretation. This approach focuses on emotions, personality, motivations, and inner conflicts. From a psychological perspective, one of the most fascinating characters is Professor Higgins. Although Higgins is intellectually brilliant, he is emotionally immature. He behaves like a child in many situations. He is impatient, self-centered, and often unaware of the emotional consequences of his actions. He understands sounds and language, but he struggles to understand feelings and relationships. His inability to appreciate Eliza's emotional needs creates much of the conflict in the later acts of the play. Many psychologists might describe Higgins as someone with highly developed intellectual abilities but underdeveloped emotional intelligence. The psychological interpretation also focuses heavily on Eliza Doolittle. Throughout the play, Eliza experiences a profound identity crisis. At the beginning, she possesses a clear sense of who she is, a poor flower girl from the working class. After her transformation, that identity becomes uncertain. She no longer belongs comfortably to her old world. At the same time, she is not fully accepted into the upper-class world. This creates confusion, anxiety, and emotional distress. Her famous question, "What's to become of me?" expresses this psychological crisis perfectly. She is searching not only for a future, but also for a stable sense of self. Another important figure in the psychological interpretation is Freddie Ainsford Hill. Unlike Higgins, Freddie provides emotional validation. He listens to Eliza. He admires her. He values her feelings. Freddie may not possess Higgins' intellectual brilliance, but he offers something equally important, emotional support. This explains why Eliza responds positively to him. At a time when she feels ignored and misunderstood, Freddie provides understanding and affection. Psychologically, he fulfills emotional needs that Higgins cannot satisfy. Therefore, these two critical approaches reveal different dimensions of the play. The Marxist interpretation emphasizes class inequality, economic power, and social structures. The psychological interpretation emphasizes emotions, identity, personal growth, and human relationships. Together, they show that Pygmalion is much more than a comedy about speech lessons. It is a profound exploration of class, power, identity, psychology, and the human search for dignity and belonging. For examination purposes, remember, Marxist view, language is social capital, class is power. Psychological view, Eliza is identity crisis, Higgins is emotional immaturity, Freddie is emotional support. These critical perspectives add depth to our understanding of Shaw's masterpiece and explain why Pygmalion continues to be studied from multiple theoretical viewpoints. Let us begin with symbolism. Throughout the play, Shaw uses ordinary objects and situations to represent larger ideas. The first symbol is flowers. Flowers are closely associated with Eliza from the beginning of the play. As a flower seller, she depends on flowers for survival. Symbolically, Flowers represent both beauty and fragility. Like a flower, Eliza possesses natural beauty and potential, but she is vulnerable to social prejudice and economic hardship. The flower imagery also reminds us that beneath society's labels, Eliza is a valuable human being deserving care and respect. The second important symbol is the bath. When Eliza is brought to Higgins' house, one of the first steps in her transformation is bathing. On a literal level, it is simply cleaning herself. On a symbolic level, however, the bath represents purification, rebirth, and the beginning of a new identity. Just as religious ceremonies often use water as a symbol of renewal, Eliza's bath marks the start of her social transformation. The third symbol is clothing. Throughout the play, clothes function as markers of social identity. When Eliza wears shabby clothes, society sees her as a poor flower girl. When she wears elegant dresses, people treat her as a lady. Shaw uses clothing to criticize a society that judges individuals according to appearance rather than character. The fourth symbol is the slippers in Act 4. At first, the slippers symbolize Eliza's subordinate position and Higgins' authority. However, when Eliza throws the slippers at Higgins, they become symbols of rebellion and independence. The moment represents her refusal to remain a servant-like figure in Higgins' life. The fifth symbol is rain. The play begins on a rainy night in Covent Garden. The rain forces people from different social classes to seek shelter together. For a brief moment, class distinctions seem less important. Thus, rain symbolizes temporary equality among social groups. Nature treats everyone the same, regardless of wealth or status. Another important symbol is the fireplace. The fireplace appears during moments of emotional conflict. Fire traditionally symbolizes transformation and change. In Pygmalion, it also reflects emotional intensity, anger, and the destruction of old relationships. It becomes a symbol of psychological transformation as Eliza struggles to redefine herself. Finally, many critics identify a Cinderella motif in the play. Like Cinderella, Eliza is a poor young woman who undergoes a dramatic social transformation. She receives new clothes, enters high society, and appears almost magical in her change. However, Shaw deliberately alters the fairy tale. Unlike Cinderella, Eliza does not achieve happiness through marriage. Instead, she achieves independence through personal growth. This difference reflects Shaw's modern and realistic outlook. Now let us examine the dramatic techniques used by Shaw. One of the most important techniques is dramatic irony. Dramatic irony occurs when the audience knows something that certain characters do not. Throughout much of the play, the audience knows Eliza's true background. However, many upper-class characters believe she is a genuine aristocrat. This creates humor and exposes the superficial nature of social judgments. Another technique is verbal irony. Higgins frequently makes comments that have unintended effects. He often believes he is being honest or practical, but his words sound insulting and hurtful. The audience recognizes the irony even when Higgins himself does not. Shaw also makes extensive use of paradox. A paradox is an apparently contradictory statement that contains truth. The best example is Alfred Doolittle. Most people desire wealth and social advancement. Doolittle, however, hates becoming rich. His situation seems absurd, yet it reveals important truths about social responsibility and middle-class expectations. Another major technique is the open ending. Traditional dramas often conclude with marriage, reconciliation, or clear resolution. Shaw rejects this convention. He leaves Eliza's future uncertain. This encourages the audience to think critically rather than passively accepting a conventional happy ending. Finally, Shaw employs anticlimax. Normally, dramatic tension ends after the hero achieves success. In Pygmalion, the opposite happens. The social experiment succeeds at the embassy reception, but the real emotional conflict begins afterward. This reversal surprises the audience and shifts attention from external achievement to internal growth. Therefore, symbolism and dramatic techniques are essential to understanding Pygmalion. Through symbols such as flowers, baths, clothes, slippers, rain, and fire, Shaw explores themes of identity and transformation. Through irony, paradox, anti-climax, and an open ending, he challenges traditional dramatic conventions and encourages audiences to question society's assumptions about class, gender, and human worth.